lake levels, fluctuating lake levels. But we're also going to be talking about the upcoming water rights adjudication, which is actually about 3 years out. But now is a good time to start talking about it because we don't want to be caught flat-footed like the people in Oreille were here a little while ago. So it's good that you're going to be educated on a lot of different subjects today. This is the first of several meetings that we will be having over the coming months. A few weeks ago, State Rep Heather Scott came to us and wanted to know, what are you doing to educate people on the upcoming water rights adjudication? So we used that initial meeting to put together today's agenda, and there are agendas up here on the far side of the table. We have a lot of smart people talking about a lot of different things. If you're interested in weeds, we're going to cover that today. Water rights adjudication is real important if you have a lakefront property. If you don't live on the lake, but you live outside of town, you have a stream running through your property, you have a pond, you have a well, or even if water pools on your property after a serious rain, the water rights adjudication will have an effect on you. So we put together this meeting today with the help of with Heather Scott. This is not a political meeting today. This is a water rights meeting. I'm not going to beat up on the feds today, maybe down the road. But today is to inform people and to let you know who to contact on those water rights issues that are most important to you. So I'd like to introduce State Representative Heather Scott. She currently serves as our state rep for District 1A. Heather has a degree in biology from the University of Akron. Prior to her election to office, she spent the last 20 years in her profession as an aquatic scientist, which I just learned that today. She's traveled around the U.S. working on fisheries and water quality studies on large and small river systems related to hydroelectric projects. So, Heather, cheers.
Thank you, Dennis. And I'm going to be the moderator today, and just welcome to this event. Thank you for giving up some of your time on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, when I'm sure this isn't one of your priorities, but I'm glad you're here. I've been wanting to help District 1 citizens and myself better understand the complicated water adjudication process that's been coming to North Idaho. Personally, I am involved in the Coeur d'Alene adjudication because I'm on the south end of the county. And I realized from going through that even though we're years away up here, the players and the agencies, they're all preparing now. They're all positioning, there's properties being bought. So education of citizens is key. And I believe that the Lake Pend Oreille Alliance is taking the lead to educate citizens on their rights in this district. They have been instrumental in organizing this event. So we're all here today because each of us understands the critical importance of protecting our water, the most precious of resources. There's much information swirling around about the adjudication, water rights, water quality, and water use. Today what we've done is we've brought together various expertise for this meeting to provide education and clarification for various water-related issues, and we're bringing together a broad diversity of interested parties, hopefully to start crafting a plan so we can move forward with a plan that ensures water rights at all levels are protected and preserved. This will be critical to ensure that North Idaho water remains under the control of North Idaho residents, first and foremost, and meets the needs of the families, businesses, and communities of North Idaho. The goals of today's event include helping you to understand the types of water rights that exist in Idaho and help you to realize at some level that you may have a vested interest in one or more of these rights. And by the end of the day, hopefully you'll be able to define and articulate what your rights are. You can't fight for something that you don't even know you have. So And hopefully you'll understand the water adjudication process and why participation is going to be critical by both private parties and public entities. And that's going to cause us to connect various groups together, and we're going to connect various groups in the public to provide a legitimate informal sources so you'll be able to stay engaged in the system. We must all understand that in order for this process to be success, we must work around our differences, and we need to come together as a local, unified force here in North Idaho to protect our resources and ensure that the multiple uses remain viable. Our common concern for water transcends party lines and disagreements. And I can assure you, we are stronger together in that North Idaho has the local expertise, desire, and commitment to show the state and federal government and other states and even other nations who will be involved in this adjudication that we place a premium value on our water for its quality, quantity, economic impacts, recreation, and environmental significance. For this afternoon, we have a really tight schedule. There's going to be a lot of speakers. Carissa up in the front row is going to hold a sign up for the speakers if it's getting close to their end and they can try to wrap it up. Because there were many speakers we wanted to invite today, like Dennis said, they're going to have many of these meetings. So I look forward to you guys all getting involved and engaged and connecting at some point. So let's just get started right away, and I'll introduce the first speaker, which is Dennis. Dennis Hall is a North Idaho native, born and raised in Coeur d'Alene. His work in the field of marketing and public relations spans 39 years and includes work on a number of regional and national businesses and public campaigns. His interest in protecting the water rights of Idaho citizens, as well as North Idaho Lake, stems from his childhood boating, fishing, and swimming in Coeur d'Alene and Lake Pend Oreille Lakes. This interest brought him to be a participant in founding the Lake Pend Oreille Alliance, the 501c3 organization of which he is a board member, along with a team of people passionate about preserving access and to the quality of Lake Pend Oreille. Dennis Hall.
Those are really nice words I wrote about myself. There is a 1927 Idaho law that indicates, let's see here, Idaho state law, as well as Senate document number 9, and a joint statement issued by President Harry Truman, that all these laws have, for the most part, been ignored by the powers that be. All these documents appropriate in trust to the people of the state of Idaho all the unappropriated water of Priest, Pend Oreille, and Coeur d'Alene Lake, to preserve those lakes for the purpose of scenic beauty, health, recreation, transportation, and commercial purposes. One of those commercial purposes is power generation. But the laws, the way they're set up now, don't give any emphasis to any one of those purposes. The joint statement issued by President Harry Truman in 1952 also indicates that all federally built dams belong to the people of the state of Idaho. The dam is ours. A lot of people don't know that, nor is it being treated like that. Right now, there are 3 entities that have a say in how the dam is run, and that's the Army Corps of Engineers, Bonneville Power Administration, and the Kalispel Tribe in Cusick, Washington. We, the people of the state of Idaho, do not have a say. We don't have a seat at that table. The Lake Pend Oreille Alliance, we have a number of goals, and I think we've listed some of them up here on the table. One of our goals, we want a seat at the table. We want the citizens of Idaho to have a seat at the table. Not necessarily the Lake Pend Oreille Alliance, but a citizen. We also, let's see, a little while ago, a couple years ago, $42 million was given to the Kalispel tribe to help reintroduce bull trout into their stretch of the river. And along with that money, they were given a seat at the table. Senate document number 9 was put together for the upstream stakeholders. That's property owners, that's municipalities, the citizens that recreate. Senate document number 9 was set up for us. Since $42 million was given to a 400-member tribe in Cusick, we will be asking and we will be litigating to receive monies. We're asking for a humble $100 million that we want to have directed to and doled out by, like the Lakes Commission here in Sandpoint, or an entity just like that, to go to upstream stakeholders to maintain those purposes that I mentioned before. So today we're asking people not only to listen, but maybe get motivated. We're going to have a tough time doing this on our own. And as we were reminded in a very friendly fashion by a gentleman from the BPA, suing them is going to be an expensive, lengthy process. And but if we don't do it, we're not going to get our what's due us, our rights. So we will be pursuing litigation here in the near future, and we could use all the help we can get. We have enough, we think we have enough paper, the laws of the state and the federal law, to where we're in the right. And so if we could get your help on that and have people today listen to all the different speakers and find out what those causes are that are most important to you. Might be weeds. There's a big weed problem. Milfoil is nasty. I'm just looking at some pictures that Mrs. Sudik showed me of, that she'd been pulling out of the lake. There are some upcoming comment periods on environmental impact statements. We need help. We need people to comment on that. So you folks are evidently as interested as I am in this type of thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't come here on a hot Sunday afternoon, which we greatly appreciate. So I've said my piece, and I think next person up, I'll let you introduce them, Heather, but there are some pretty smart people that have been through this already, and they deserve a good listen. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Elaine Willman. Elaine is a specialist in the field of federal Indian policy, a constant researcher, speaker, activist, and an author of 2 books, Going to Pieces, The Dismantling of the United States of America, and Slumbering Thunder, a primer to confronting the spread of federal Indian policy and tribalism overwhelming America. Ms. Williams attended 2 years in law school, has a master's in public administration, and 96 credits towards a doctorate degree in federal policy. She is of strong Cherokee ancestry. Her spouse is Shoshone and a direct descendant of Sacagawea. Ms. Williams has lived for 25 years on 3 Indian reservations, Yakima, Washington, Oneida, Wisconsin, and the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana. Nearly 40 years of her professional career as a community and economic development director, land use planning, and administrative services for local governments provided for her a keen sense of government balance, required mutual respect, and necessary separations of jurisdictional authority on Indian reservations located in host towns, counties, and states. Elaine, I'm honored to have you speak today, and thanks for coming to share.
you, Heather, and thank you very much for inviting me and putting this occasion. I cannot believe the turnout here on a hot Sunday afternoon. I'm absolutely impressed and happy. I want to thank Heather for brainstorming this, pulling this together, and Dennis and Rich and the Ponderay Alliance. I spent a lovely yesterday afternoon in St. Mary's with a wonderful group of folks, and I absolutely love to come to the Idaho Panhandle. You folks take care of business, and you have for quite a while, and you're not done yet, I'm afraid to tell you. But before I start, Heather, how long do I have?
15.
15, okay, you give me a signal, because I can't go on. I want to ask a goofy question. How many elected officials do we have in the room here today? Just show of hands. Quite a few. How many farmers, irrigators, cattlemen, or folks like that? More. How many recreators, tourism, small businesses? There you go. There you go. Well, I just wanted to be sure I say something irritating to all parties. So, raise up. But the most important thing I want to say to Idaho as a state, and the people of Idaho as people, is I'm really, really proud of you. I've lived for 2 years in Montana, and I lived for 16 years in Washington State. I was born passing through Portland, Oregon, but Oregon State's in dire straits too. Of your northwestern states, Idaho, and Idaho alone, is the only one that is working pretty well at preserving its state authority. Its state authority over its waters, its natural resources, its jurisdictional authorities, even on open Indian reservations. Idaho is remembering it as a state. Washington is entirely forgotten. Those are the coin-operated elected officials that have been taken over by 31 tribes. Montana, you can fit 3 Washington states in Montana, only 7 little tribes. They own the state of Montana. They absolutely own it. And the story that I had to tell you is I'm a preview of coming attractions here in northern Idaho. If every single one of you and all the people you know don't just stay at the wheel and mean it and be noisy, because you have something sneaking in on you that isn't here yet. But it is well underway behind closed doors. And it will just drop in on your porch. And fortunately, you have wonderful alliances and groups in place doing their research now, so it won't be a total surprise. You'll be ready to hit back. See, things were a total surprise in Montana. I had been living in Wisconsin for the past 8 years, working for a wonderful village there on the Oneida Reservation, and I got called by some folks in Montana saying, you have to come out here. This was September 2014. And I was asked to come out here because they were having a really difficult water compact negotiation. And so I go out there knowing pretty much nothing about it, but learned really quickly. And they invited me out 4 other times during that negotiation process. By the 3rd time, I told my family, we have to move there. I have to get in the middle of that, because this is just felony ugly and completely unconstitutional. And what was going on was, during the 1990s, behind closed doors, the federal government, the tribal government, the state of Montana, Fish and Wildlife, all the fun folks, were collaborating on this wonderful water compact to avoid litigation with the Salish Kootenai tribe. Those are the tribes that are on the Flathead. And they wanted to avoid litigation. So the idea was that the state of Montana would give all of the in-stream flow control, all of the control of waters of the entire Flathead River through the 11 counties that border the Idaho Panhandle. All 11 counties, Flathead River, main stream that feeds into the Columbia, being handed off to a little tribe, the Salish Kootenai tribe, in order so the tribe didn't sue for water adjudication. Now, the state owns that water, the state owns that river, but that wasn't a problem for Governor Bullock in the state of Montana, nor the legislators. So in this water compact, they have handed off the entire Flathead River, control of all the in-stream flows and most of what happens on the river now. In addition to that, the state of Montana wanted to be sure that everything went well for the Salish Scooty and handed them 55 million state taxpayer dollars just to get them off to a good start. And the Flathead Irrigation District, Flathead Joint Board of Irrigators, that's 4 big irrigation districts down there, were pretty much handcuffed, and the tribe would now control what water the irrigators got and didn't. Now this is a big ag area, cattle area. The whole reservation is ag economy. So, and then if that wasn't enough, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, Northwest Energy, some of the former owners of the Big Kerr Dam, the Big Kerr hydropower dam there in Polson, is it's what they call a black start. And you can, where all the dams that go out in the Northwest area, the Kerr Dam can restart itself and power up the other dams. That was given to the Salish Scooty tribe as well. In addition, the Bureau of Indian Affairs controls all the power on the entire reservation. We have 3 counties, 11 towns. Bureau of Indian Affairs controls your light switches and your hospital equipment in the towns and whatnot. BIA controls the power. The tribe there controls the dam and receives all the revenues from the water and the sale and the power of the dam. And they don't even have to report to the Montana Public Services Commission. They can set any rates they want, do anything they want. It's just their dam. This is a dam that serves the American public for decades. It is now a tribal dam generating revenue just for them, and tribal governments have 0 duty to a non-tribal person or property. Your tribal governments have no duty to you. They have none in their tribal constitutions. Kalispell, I don't care what the tribe is. Their duty is to their enrolled members and their trust properties. Ends there. What's been going on is that the federal agency has been delegating its authority to control you out to these tribes. And they've done that with treatment estates for air quality and water quality. The feds have been giving their authority to these small tribes to get out beyond their enrolled members and their trust lands to tell you what water you can have, and you what air you can use, and you what kind of tribal permits you have to have. And if you have a problem, then you have to go to tribal court, in which you may not select your attorney, and you are facing a kangaroo court. But you can't leave that court till you exhaust tribal remedies, and the time and money, there's no recourse unless you push back fast. What's beautiful about here is you're ahead of the game. The folks in Montana were behind the curve. This was sneaked up on them. It had been planned for 12 to 15 years by all these agencies and dropped on them in 2013. They managed to fight it and beat it back in 2013, but they got it pushed through on in April of 2015. And that's the way it is. The state of Montana has not just walked away from 30,000 farmers and irrigators and people who live on the reservation. They are in an adversarial position. We've not just been abandoned by the state. The state can't do enough to help this little tribe with state-owned waters controlled by the tribe, with no interference or intrusion at all with a big hydropower dam. And who cares who controls the power? I mean, that is the area that we live in Montana. You would not know it's the United States at all. And that sounds like really creepy, but it is our reality. And it's just 15 minutes away, or it has been under the previous administration, from just sneaking up and then, gotcha. There's been excessive federal government overreaching, excessive. I'm working with folks over in Skagit County. I'm working with folks in Oklahoma, all over the western states who are experiencing this. What is this thing called federal? What is it? How can this tribe do that? Well, the tribes are very willing pawns. It's other agencies. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Endangered Species Act, implementing that, the USDA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, all of these agencies. If the federal agency wants to reduce state authority, take little state lands, get in the state's face a little better, they use the tribes as very willing pawns. It's really our federal agency. You know, you just heard at the beginning of this, we weren't going to bash the federal agencies. I am here to bash the bejesus out of the federal agency. You know, I really am. You know, so, and I'll tell you why, just a little side note really quick, because I want to get out to some hopeful stuff. A little side note. Last week, I was interviewed by a wonderful photojournalist, a very prominent photojournalist. Apparently she's seen some of my stuff on the internet. And she was coming out, she works for the New Yorker magazine. I would not imagine there's a lot of subscriptions to the New Yorker in the Western states. The New Yorker is a super liberal but very prominent magazine. So this photojournalist calls me out of the blue. She says, my publisher wants me to come out across rural America and talk to very conservative women active in politics. And I'd like to meet with you. I'm thinking, I hear the ambush, I hear the ambush. But I'm the kind of person that says, I get my information out anywhere I can, whether you agree with me or not. I'm going to say what I need to say. And I said, well, sure, come on out. And I helped her meet a few other conservative active women that gathered at my home. And after this interview, and she was very charming, very brilliant girl, to her credit, 36 years old, spent a month in Nigeria, riding around in old beat-up military trucks, helping the Nigerian army rescue boys kidnapped by Boko Haram. So this little lady has some brains and some guts and some courage. I very much respected her, even though she's way liberal. So we had this wonderful talk afterwards. No offense to the liberals in the room. I think I'm revealing myself. But we had this wonderful talk after the women left. She's sitting on my patio, we're kind of summarizing, and she's talking a little bit about the Muslim experience, and I kind of don't want to go there. And then she's lived abroad. She's had a very different life experience than us. She's lived abroad many years, traveled the world, does beautiful work, bright young woman. And we're in this conversation about the United States. And I said, you know, honestly, had we not turned course in November, I have a great-grandson that is 2. And I said, I literally fear that by the time he's 21, there will not be a United States. That's where we're going. There's some big picture global stuff, United Nations stuff, Agenda 21 stuff, all playing in to this sneaky little use of tribal governments as pawns that come take your water and control your lives. So I'm saying, I'm afraid there won't be a United States. And her answer was, well, that'll be okay. We'll be all right. And I was stunned. This is an American citizen, a brilliant young woman, and it's just okay if the United States is gone in 20 years. That, you know, that's got me so troubled that my fellow Americans can get that far out there that it's okay if we get replaced by some other form of government. That I plan to write and talk and scream bloody murder about that. It troubles me deeply. It troubles me deeply. We are, you know, the last best hope for liberty and freedom. And it does begin with land and water. And it also stays strong with state authority. And you have Olympia in Washington. And you have Oregon, Governor Brown in Oregon, Jay Inslee in Olympia. You have Governor Bullock, can't throw enough money and state resources to the tribes there. You know, these states are wonderful states that are not behaving like states, and they're just circling the drain. They're getting an economic reversal. Idaho is not the strongest state for state authority, but by comparison with the other states in the Northwest, it's way ahead of the game, and I think largely because of people like Dennis, Rich, in St. Mary's, it's Pam, Secord, people like individuals that say, What can I do? How noisy do you need me to be? Who do you want me to send an email to? Who can I phone? Who can I help? How can I talk with my kids and family so the next generations are clued in? We have to do that. Now here's where your opportunity to do that comes in. And that is, one of the ways to be informed, cheap commercial time, there's 2 books over here. The Going to Pieces book is like Thelma and Louise road trip. Any of you remember that movie? Me and a wacko, I'm saying wacko with the deepest affection because she passed away last Monday. But me and a videographer, gal, made a road trip from Washington State to New York across 17 Indian reservations. And we held the camera up to tribal members, sheriffs, counties, county elected officials, county commissioners, farmers, cattlemen, bankers, teachers. We just held the camera up, and they were very eager to tell their reality about life on the reservation. I'm probably running short, aren't I? Okay.
You're over, but
Oh,
so just wrap her up.
okay. So that's the Going to Pieces book, and it was done in 2005. We're in 2017, and it is selling bigger now because everything those folks were worried about is in our face today. The Slumbering Thunder book is a handbook, a collection of my works with different communities, and it is very good for community leaders and elected officials. Actually, it's good for everybody, but those are books that family members should be reading too. Here's where the optimism and the big hope comes in. On June 22nd, actually, when Secretary Terry Zinke was confirmed as a secretary, I have to eat a little crow because I wrote letters and told everybody, we don't want Zinke. He's a congressman from Montana. You know, the tribes own him. Well, by golly, he must know the difference between a congressional hat and a secretariat. Because he, 2 weeks after he was confirmed, he said that the federal government Department of Interior can open up the Indian Reorganization Act for review. That act's 83 years old. It has never been reviewed, and it's been far exceeded. And then he said they're going to open up the federal trust relationship with Indian tribes for review. That would never have happened had we not had the present administration succeed. And so, following his little announcement of that, Congress has already opened up the Indian Reorganization Act for review. That is all of the Indian policy. Then in June 22nd, there's a handout here called Make Your Voices Heard. I didn't bring enough copies, but there's 2 ways. Secretary Zinke has opened up a public comment period on 5 major statutes that the feds have been abusing. The Indian Reorganization Act is one, mining and timber is another, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. There's 5 major acts, Federal Land Policy Management Act, the Bundy and Hammond issue. They're opening up these statutes where Congress has said they have gone far astray in terms of federal overreaching to reform and review. And so this is the most optimistic time, and it's a time when in this year, 2017, and next year, 2018, we can turn a corner. So that's my pitch. Pick up one of these, and thank you very much. Sorry, I went over it.
No, that's right.
I want you to touch briefly, just 2 sentences. Tell quickly what's going on in Washington with the dam over there, or is it Oregon? That's been turned over to.
You talking about the Klamath dams?
Yeah.
Quickly, like 2 sentences.
There's 4 Klamath dams. I think I'm hearing the one's already down, and there's other 3 are coming down, and that's a whole compendium of tribes and the Oregon state assisting and taking out the farming and irrigation. The previous administration has been taking down crop production, and they're doing that using water. And they're doing that using tribes of the Endangered Species Act. They've totally wiped out the whole San Joaquin Valley, which was 20% of our food production. They're taking down the Klamath farmers and irrigators, taking down the Flathead, taking down the farmers in Wyoming, and they'll be after the farmers and agriculture everywhere they can.
Thank you. And there's also areas in Washington right now that they're not even allowed to drill for any more wells.
Yes. Oh, Skagit County, yes.
Skagit County, yeah.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you have property, you can't develop it. So we could go on, but we're going to our next speaker. Thank you, Elaine. Linda Werner is our next speaker. Linda is a senior water resource agent for the Idaho Department of Water Resources. She's been with the department for 10 years. She started at the Western region in Boise and moved north, and she worked the the Snake River Basin adjudication. And then about 3 years ago, she moved up to Coeur d'Alene, and she's been working on the Coeur d'Alene Spokane River Basin adjudication. And she's going to talk for just about 3 minutes and give you an overview of the adjudication process, where we're at in the process, and what that looks like. And I noticed some people going like this. Can everybody hear okay? Okay. Come on up, Linda.
Thank you for inviting me. I am happy to be here. We don't have much time, so I'll get right to it. To adjudicate, hold it real close. To adjudicate is to settle an issue before the court. In this case, the issue is water rights. There are many advantages to an adjudication. It is a way to acquire a water right and protect the water use. There are historical water uses out there that have never been recorded. Another advantage is that existing water uses may have changed over time. Points of diversion, amounts of water used, places of use, and types of use. This is a way to update those records. The result is that we will know how much water is being used. Consequently, we will know how much water will be available for future usage. What makes up a water right? Two things: a developed diversion and a water usage to go with it. I'll start with a little history. The Northern Idaho adjudication is an offshoot of the Snake River Basin adjudication, which began in 1987. What that did was determine the water uses from those sources tributary to the Snake River. To do that, we asked most water users to file a notice of claim to a water right on their existing water uses. This includes those uses based on posted notices, licenses, decreed rights, and those rights which have never been recorded. These are historical beneficial use rights. Since the water rights in southern Idaho were decreed, we thought it'd be good to determine the water uses in northern Idaho. So we got the go-ahead from the legislature, started the Northern Idaho adjudication. We divided it up into 3 phases, phases 1, 2, and 3. So where are we now in this process? We're on the downhill side of phase 1. That's the Coeur d'Alene Spokane River Basin adjudication, Basin 95. We've started accepting claims on phase 2. That's the Palouse River Basin, Basin 87. We've got the last phase, Clark Fork, Oreille River Basin, Basins 96 and 97. And I do have maps over here. Before we can start up here, we need to approach the legislature for funding. We anticipate doing this in fiscal year 2020. When that time comes, we will notify all landowners in the specified basins by sending out a commencement notice. This will have instructions as to what you'll need to do, when you'll need to do it, and how to do it. It will ask you to file a claim form outlining your water usage. Most, but not all water users will be asked to file. There are some deferrals. One exemption to filing are those water users which have a domestic usage. This includes in-house use in less than or equal to ½ an acre of lawn or garden irrigation. It's called a de minimis use. A lot of people have it. Also, it includes stock watering. Another exemption is in-stream stock. In-stream stock is where stock drink directly out of a stream. There is no diversion. However, even though it's not required to file a claim for this type of water usage, it's a good idea to do so. Why? Claiming uses in an adjudication is a way to record and document water use and priority date. We have the avenue to do it, so let's do it now. It establishes a decreed right that remains a part of the property. This is an actual property right. Acquiring a decreed right protects those historical water uses and may remove future uncertainty. To make a claim to a water right, you'll need 2 forms. There's a short form. It's used for domestic and other small uses, which are less than 13,000 gallons per day. Cost of this claim will be $25. The long form, which is used to claim other types of water uses, such as commercial, industrial, irrigation. Cost for this claim will be $50. There will be a variable fee. Irrigation, $1 per acre. Industrial use, for example, if you're using 0.20 cubic feet per second, that will be $20. Based on $100 per cubic feet per second, you're looking at $70. So, remember, we will not be in this area until approximately fiscal year 2020. You've got to get the funding from the legislator first, but there is something you can do in the meantime. Make sure your address is updated so we can get a hold of you. Secondly, a priority date. In Idaho, first in time is first in right. You'll need proof of this date. Examples are well drilling reports. We have many of those at the department. Affidavits, first-hand knowledge, who, what, when, where, and why. Be specific. Tax law history, you can get it from the assessor's office. Homestead documents, receipts for equipment purchases, dated aerial photos. You also need to know your property's legal description, as we'll need to know it for the point of diversion and place of use. You can get that from your tax statement, or you can get it from the assessor's office. Parcel numbers are great. A map. You need a map showing where the diversion is and the location of the place of use. You can get these from the library, possibly the assessor's office, maybe downloaded from Google Maps. Finally, we've got many resources available on our website. I've got some handouts. There's some sheets over there on how to use the website. There's some question and answer on the Northern Idaho adjudication. And lastly, my business card and my co-workers. So, feel free to call us with questions. I see we have a question.
No questions. We're already over, but thank you, Linda. So my business cards up here. I have been to the website, and it is a great site, and you can. It's very self-explanatory. So, moving right along, our next speaker is Norm Semenko. Norm is a partner with Moffitt Thomas in Boise, where he manages. Don't hold that against him. Where he manages the firm's water, environment, natural resource practice groups. He has represented numerous water user organizations and individuals in water right adjudications before federal, state, and tribal courts and in various agency proceedings. Norm previously served as the executive director and general counsel for the Idaho Water Users Association, promoting the legislation and regulatory agenda of the organization in the Idaho State Legislature and the state agency rulemaking. Norm's a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center, and he's earned a political science degree from the University of Idaho. And in my opinion, Norm, and probably many other opinions from several around this state, Norm is the leading water expert on Idaho water law in this state. And so thanks for coming up here today, and I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Heather, and good morning. My most important diploma is from Spear Lake Elementary. Sixth grade there, and I'm also a product of Lakeland High School, which isn't too far from the neighborhood here. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. You heard a great summary from Linda of how the adjudication works, and just so you understand, the Department of Water Resources is that technical expert and the state government agency that actually performs the mechanics to make sure the adjudication gets done. They're not a party. They don't have a responsibility to protect anybody's particular interest other than to say, here's the process, here's how you do it, here's how you get through it. It's an important part of the process, but they're not going to be, and they're not expected to be the advocates for all of you. The Lake Pond Ray Alliance, the other groups that are involved are going to be doing that in the adjudication. That's what I want to talk to you about today, to understand what the adjudication is so you can be ready for it. How many people in here have sued the United States before? It's not easy. It's very difficult to sue the United States. In the 1950s, Congress recognized that water right adjudications in the West that had occurred were not complete. And they could never be complete because of the 63%, for example, in Idaho, of the land that's owned by the federal government. All of these latent water right claims that the federal government has. So Congress passed the McCarran Amendment that said that you, the citizens of the states, can sue the federal government and require them to come into a state court, not a federal court, and adjudicate their claims with you. So that's what this adjudication is. It's a McCarran Amendment adjudication. The federal government has to file their claims, so they can't hold back for the next 50 or 100 years and say, well, that's nice that you have that water right on Lake Oreille or one of the tributaries, but we have a superior right that we don't really have to do anything other than tell you we have it. They are forced to come into this adjudication and file their claims. And if they don't, they lose that opportunity forever. So they will be doing that. What you heard from Linda about filing water right claims and domestic wells and stock water and all that, that will be going on. Now, how many of you have what you would consider to be a water right? You've seen a piece of paper from the Department of Water Resources that has a number on it, a permit, a license, a transfer, something like that that you consider a water right from the department. Okay, so all of you are going to be filing claims in the adjudication to protect what you already have. And some of you are probably thinking right now, no, I've already done all that. Well, yeah, you got the permit or you got the license or you transferred the right, but you have to file that in the adjudication to confirm it to be valid into the future. So you will be filing claims. If you don't, you will lose that water right forever. You must file it in that adjudication. How many of you have domestic wells, your own individual domestic well? You can, but are not required to, and I'm going to highly recommend that you do file a claim in the adjudication if you want to do this next part. To be in the adjudication, you have to file a water right claim. It's not enough to recreate on the water. It's not enough to be in a subdivision and have an interest in water that's delivered to you or in an irrigation entity. You must be a water right claimant. You must file a claim. If you can't do that, get to know somebody who can file a claim and support them, because this next part is very important. In the Coeur d'Alene Spokane River Basin adjudication, the federal government filed 362 Federal Reserve water right claims. What's a Federal Reserve water right claim? It's a claim by the federal government that says, we don't have to get a permit from the state, we don't have to get a license confirming that use. What we have as the federal government, this is backed up by a U.S. Supreme Court case or two, when we, the federal government, reserve land for a particular purpose, whatever the primary purpose of that reservation is, if it requires water, Congress implied the water right for that Federal Reserve. 353 of those 362 claims filed in the Coeur d'Alene Spokane River Basin adjudication were filed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs on behalf of the Coeur d'Alene tribe. The other 9 were filed by the Forest Service for the Forest Reserve. Okay? What's the importance of those? They can be for huge quantities of water. They're typically not diversionary rights. They're rights to leave water in the stream with a very senior priority. So if, for example, you have a Federal Reserve water right and it's recognized on a stream with, say, an 1873 priority, everyone that came later, say your license, you got a great license, you're 1962, congratulations. You're like 90 years behind that Federal Reserve water right. So when the stream goes dry, and last year was pretty dry, right? When the stream goes down, if it goes down below whatever that minimum in-stream flow that was decreed to the United States is, no one else can divert water from that stream until that is met. If you don't believe that can happen, talk to the folks in the Klamath who have been shut off because of a Federal Reserve water right with the tribe over there. This isn't against tribes. This is about the United States filing these claims. So what can you do about it? Some of these claims are interesting. They're imaginative. They're without a lot of basis in a lot of cases. So folks have to object. We can, in many instances, rely on the state of Idaho, not Idaho Department of Water Resources. They're the technical expert that will convey those claims to the court. But the state of Idaho, acting through the Attorney General's office, can and does file objections to these Federal Reserve water rights. Is that enough? Is it enough to trust your state government to work over the negotiating table with the federal government and the particular tribe that might be involved or agency person?
No.
even if you do trust them, what does it hurt to file your own objection? To have a seat at the table, to be able to sue the king, to be able to sue the federal government, and to be able to be in that group. How about if you're with 100 other people who have the same kind of philosophy as you and concern that water rights should be, and water resources should be controlled at the state and local level and not by some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C.? What if you all band together and represented together at the table with the state and the United States and the tribe and the federal agencies? And every time the state's doing something right, you say, attaboy, you're going the right direction. And when they don't, you can say, I don't think that's quite right. That's exactly what we did in the Snake River Basin adjudication. That's exactly what we're doing in the Coeur d'Alene Spokane River Basin adjudication, and it's exactly what you need to do in the Clark Fork Oreille Basin adjudication. You need to be actively involved. Those of you that can, should file claims in the adjudication, and when those Federal Reserve water rights are filed by the federal government, you've got to object. You've got to object to every single one of them. Because if you don't, the one that you don't object to is going to be used as a vehicle to settle, and you won't be at the table. So you've got to, and it's easy to withdraw an objection if you decide you don't need it. But try filing one late, and you'll get an army of attorneys from the Department of Justice meeting you at the courthouse door. You won't get in most cases. And I speak from experience. I saw the cowboys in southern Idaho try to file late objections to the claims that were filed by the BLM and the Forest Service down there, and they never got in. The only way we got that done is because anybody can object to anybody else in the adjudication. As long as you filed a claim, you can object to someone clear across the river basin from you. You don't have to have injury type standing, because all the water resources are connected. So the courts found you have standing. In the case down in southern Idaho, it was too late to file objections to the federal claims in the Cowboys' specific allotments. So they went and saw that there was another 16,000 claims that had been filed by the Forest Service and the BLM in other people's allotments across the state, and they objected to those 16,000 claims, and that was the leverage that got them to the negotiating table so those decrees could be reopened and all those folks could have water rights decreed in their names for the stock that they actually brought to the water and beneficially used the water for. That's the kind of leverage you get if you are organized, you know what you're doing, what the rules are, and you work together. In the Coeur d'Alene Spokane River Basin adjudication, of those 353 claims that were filed to the tribe and the 9 that were filed to the Forest Service, a good number of them have been resolved to our benefit. The Forest Service claims, the 9 of those, 3 of those have been settled, including one for a wild and scenic river that had a Federal Reserve water rate, and the federal government agreed, the Forest Service, that those should not impact existing uses of water and even future uses of water of the residents in the area. So that one came out all right. And then 2 for administrative sites, those came out all right. There's 6 others that are going to have to be amended because the Forest Service hasn't been specific enough in their claims for us to be able to evaluate them, so those will happen. The 353 include a right for Lake Coeur d'Alene for the tribe, for the southern third of the lake, for the various tributaries, for fishing, for on-reservation uses, etc. There's been summary judgment motions filed and argued. 84 of those 353 claims have been dismissed by the court. Now it's subject to reconsideration. It's subject to appeal to the Idaho Supreme Court. Appeals in this matter go to our state Supreme Court, not to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals or some other federal court. They go to the Idaho Supreme Court because remember, this is in a state adjudication court. And then if there's a real specific federal question, you can ask for the U.S. Supreme Court to look at it after the Idaho Supreme Court does. One other thing to know about the federal claims is that they don't have to pay those fees that Linda was just talking about. The sovereign immunity waiver to sue the federal government, to bring them into the state court, does not include paying fees and costs. So they don't have to pay fees. So they can imagine any kind of dream of a claim they can come up with and file it and make us have to defend against it. So those 84 claims that have been dismissed in the Coeur d'Alene Spokane River Basin adjudication, we'll see what happens with those. The rest of them are going to go to the quantification stage and or be part of a cross appeal if and when we get to that in the Coeur d'Alene Spokane adjudication. So what I really want to focus in on with you today, Linda talked about diversionary rights and divert water and you put it to beneficial use. There is a certain kind of right in Idaho that doesn't require diversion from the source and putting it to beneficial use. An in situ water right. In-stream stock watering is an example of that, but the legislature also has created a program where the Idaho Water Resource Board can apply to the Department of Water Resources to keep water in stream for scenery, aesthetics, recreation, transportation, all those things. And they apply, it goes through a process, and people can protest, and senior rights are protected. And it's a very exacting, very rigorous program the department has since 1978. And you can argue the merits back and forth of certain in-stream flows that have been designated. Long before the 1978 statute, in 1927, and this is what Dennis was referring to, in 1927, the federal government proposed a big irrigation project in Washington State. How many of you have heard of the Columbia Basin Project?
Oh, yeah.
Cooley ended up getting built later. Before Cooley existed, the plan was to use Lake Coeur d'Alene and Lake Oreille, many of you know this, and perhaps Priest, as reservoirs for the federal government to build the irrigation project for the farmers down in Washington State. Well, what do you think people in the state of Idaho and in this area thought of that? Not a good deal. So the legislature, the first of its kind in Idaho, passed a statute that said that the governor of the state of Idaho is authorized and directed to file an application with the Department of Water Resources to appropriate all the unappropriated water in those 3 lakes to stay in place in those lakes for recreation, aesthetics, transportation, for the benefit of all the people of the state of Idaho. And that was licensed in 1928. That water right claim, that foundational claim for this area, will be filed in this adjudication and will be decreed to the state of Idaho. What business does the federal government or a tribe or anyone else have to file a claim for that water that's already been appropriated by the state of Idaho for the benefit of all the people of the state of Idaho? That's the cornerstone to protect the water uses in this area and the lake level in this area for Lake Oreille, for Priest, and for Lake Coeur d'Alene. We're having that argument right now in the Coeur d'Alene adjudication. We made the argument, the judge did not agree. We'll get a chance in front of the Idaho Supreme Court perhaps. We said it's already all appropriated for the benefit of all the people in the state of Idaho. Tribe, not tribe, doesn't matter. So you don't need a Federal Reserve water right. You only have a Federal Reserve water right if that Federal Reserve requires a water right. That without the water right, the purpose of the reservation would be completely defeated. How can the purpose of the reservation, if it includes having water in the lake for fishing, how can that be entirely defeated if you already have a state licensed right held by the governor for the benefit of all people of the state of Idaho? The judge didn't take on that argument. We believe it's the appropriate argument, and hopeful that the Idaho Supreme Court will take that on at the appropriate time. So if you want to protect that water right that the state of Idaho has to the lake, and you want the opportunity to fight against any federal claims to do otherwise, you've got to file a claim, and you've got to be organized with the others who are filing claims in the adjudication. That's the message that I want to leave with you about adjudication. With regard to what Dennis said about the dam, it's on. That's going to happen. And it's yet to be seen exactly how it's going to happen, but folks in other parts of the country, tribal, state, local, whatever, have gotten say over how dams are operated. And we've seen now litigation by certain litigating conservation groups, and that's not all conservation groups, but the ones that make a living off of suing the federal government, litigating, and collecting attorney's fees when they win. Those folks have learned how to get greater control over our dams. We can do the same thing, and you have a great legal basis to make that argument with regard to the 1927 water right, the Senate document, the whole history of the development of Albany. It doesn't necessarily have to be an either or, us versus them, a zero-sum game, but we have to have a say. The Lakes Commission has been a big part of that, but we need to go the next step. So that game is on, and we will see that occurring over the next couple of months, I think. 2 other things I want to leave you with real quick for opportunities for public comment. One is the Columbia River Basin System Operation Review. This is the judge down in Portland saying that the way the dams are operated downstream and including LB, is not legal and needs to be redone. So there's going to be a 5-year EIS process that started last year that'll culminate in 2021. And you've got the opportunity when those alternatives are put out, they're in the process of developing those alternatives, the federal agencies are, to comment. Comment on the operation of the system, particularly how it impacts potentially this area. They're going to have an opportunity to be involved in that. And let your elected representatives in Congress know what you think about that system operation review for the Columbia Basin area. And then the second one is the Columbia River Treaty. The Columbia River Treaty is an international treaty between the United States and Canada. It's been in place for going on 60 years. It's about providing flood control protection and about producing power. How the revenues are split, the power is split, and how the flood control benefits are provided by Canada. That's up for potential renegotiation in 2024. The way the treaty operates will change with regard to flood control. Right now, there's guaranteed space that Canada provides every year for flood control. That's for 60 years, it's been paid for. In 2024, 60 years into the treaty, it changes to a called upon system, where the United States can call upon Canada to provide flood control. It's going to cost money. And we have to demonstrate to Canada, the United States, that we've made effective use of our projects before we can ask them to do anything further in the future. Well, what's effective use mean? It means we got to do more to provide our own flood control. Well, what does that mean for operation of Albany? What does it mean for operations of things that can be fluctuated up and down? Do we need to have it down sooner for flood control? Do we operate the system based on what's needed for this community? Or do we operate it based on what's needed for flood control in Portland? These same questions are being asked by irrigators in southern Idaho, or American Falls and Palisades and Jackson. Are the operations going to have to be changed to benefit system-wide flood control? The United States says no, that's not what the treaty means. But that's what Canada says it means. Now, is this all posturing to get better bargaining position for these future payments for flood control? We don't know. All we know is that by its own terms, the way the treaty exists now, without any further discussion or negotiation or changes, it will change. That's the way it was written 60 years ago. It will change in 2024. So we need to be vigilant on that front. And then also this notion that this two-purpose treaty should have a third purpose added of ecosystem function. I'm sorry, but what is that? What does that mean? Now the Columbia Basin Treaty is going to be for ecosystem function. And I guarantee you, nobody knows what it is. The BPA doesn't know what it is. The Corps doesn't know what it is. The tribes don't know what it is. They don't know what they want it to be. But I testified at a hearing in front of the Senate Energy Committee in late 2013, and I watched the representative for the U.S. entity, the Corps of Engineers and BPA, and the representative for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission from the Nez Perce tribe sit next to each other. They're both involved in this. They both were part of the regional recommendation that was sent to the State Department that said we should add ecosystem function. The representative for the U.S. entity said it means that Canada, who sends water down for flow augmentation for the salmon on a yearly basis, that should be a permanent deal. That's what ecosystem function is. And the guy for CritFix says ecosystem function is basically we want higher flows during dry years. We want more water when there's not enough water through the whole Columbia Basin system. We, the tribes, have a definition of ecosystem function. It wasn't attached to the regional recommendation because we couldn't convince everybody else, but we have a definition. This is what we think it is. Senator Risch, who's on the committee, his reaction was, well, folks, if we're going to put ecosystem function in the treaty, and he wasn't saying that we shouldn't, we got to know what it is. People will be litigating over this for 40 years. In the Northwest Power Act, the words equitable treatment of fish and wildlife and power is in there. They've been arguing since the act was passed in 1980 what that means. So you've got to define it with precision. My own view is we have enough domestic environmental laws. We don't need this in an international treaty. I hope that's what prevails with the current administration. I think they're going to look long and hard at whether to include ecosystem function in the treaty. Canada doesn't want it, added into the treaty. It's complicated enough to figure out the power sharing distribution formula and the flood control issue. And when the Trump administration and Canada get through NAFTA and softwood, this is third on the list, maybe. And it'll take several months before they get to it. But be engaged in that process. Let your elected representatives know what you think, that we don't want something that's going to change the operation. You know, it's bad enough dealing with the Corps, right? We don't know what they're going to do. We're a tribe downstream. Now it's going to be in an international treaty, and it's going to dictate the water has to go downstream or the flood control space needs to be made available. We don't need that. I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but be engaged in that process as well. So get involved in adjudication. This group and your legislators and all those folks are great resources. Get involved in the Columbia Snake River system operation process over the next several years, and definitely the Columbia River Treaty as well. And I'm sure you'll be receiving updates on what's going on with the efforts on the dam. So with that, it's been a great privilege to be with you today, and thank you, Heather and Ralph and everybody that organized this. Appreciate it.
I'm guessing no one has enough money to hire Norm for a long-term project, but something you might not know is he's my lawyer. And you say, how did that happen? And how can I afford that? But I just joined a nonprofit group that was actually getting involved in the adjudication. And so if we cannot divide ourselves, if we can join groups, because we all want what's best for our lake and our resource up here, it's amazing what you can afford. And it's amazing how much you can fight federal overreach with that. So thanks a lot, Norm. So our next speaker, we're going to do a lot of quick speakers now to try to get through a lot of different topics, but we want you to understand the difference between like private, public, and commercial rights. There's recreational rights, there's aesthetic rights, there's all these different rights. So our first speaker is going to have 3 minutes. Is going to be Dan Elliott. Dan's been involved with farming for most of his life. He grew up on a dairy farm in Indiana. He spent 8 years in the military. He's a 50-year resident of Bonner County. And he's been on the Bonner County Farm Bureau Board of Directors for 15 years and the president for the last 5. The purpose of the Farm Bureau at the county level is to promote agriculture within the county, but along with that, they find themselves involved with many other issues relating to agriculture, such as property rights, water rights, regulations, restrictions, and I could probably go on. Farm Bureau is just a great group. They've watched many of these issues. They keep an eye on them down in Boise and across at the federal level, and they have about 63,000 members in Idaho, which is just great, looking out for you, the citizen. So Dan, you want to come up and share a little bit?
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, it's not very often I get a chance like this, and I'm sure you've digested everything you've heard so far, right? You remember it when you walk out the door? I'm in the same group. I want to give a little history real quick on Farm Bureau itself for sure. When everybody says Farm Bureau, they think insurance. Well, there's another side to that, and that is Bonner County. Every county has one. And our prime purpose is to promote agriculture. And like Heather's mentioned, that you get into a lot of other associated issues with that. And today we're here to talk about the water part of it. And I'm not going to try to state the policy for Farm Bureau or American Farm Bureau. It's on the website, and I encourage you to look it up because it's long and involved, some parts of it. But I'm going to shorten your time a little bit because some of this ground that I was going to cover already has been. And I'll just say it this way, that, you know, there are powers in numbers. We have a pretty good voice in the state of Idaho. And I don't care whether you're a liberal or a conservative. See this right here? This is what it's all about. So we should all be on the same page here, and we should stay tuned in. And the scary part about this is, if we're the only people in this county that could come to this meeting tonight, I hope we're not the only ones that are worried about water and not taking it for granted. So That's it for me. I appreciate the time.
Do you want to touch on irrigation at all, or
Well,
just your cards
the
are up front?
irrigation rights are going to come into play sooner or later. The water rights, there's water rights on irrigation. We just don't want any more restrictions or problems. We're trying to eliminate them. I hope with this president we have now, maybe we can tune out some of these things, and groups like the EPA won't have quite so much ridiculous horsepower.
Our next speaker is going to be Bob Hansen. Bob is the owner of Water Systems Management, a small contract firm operating water and wastewater systems in the panhandle of North Idaho. Bob was appointed on the Idaho Bureau of Occupational Licensing back in 2006 by Governor Kim Thorne, and then reappointed for another term in 2009, and then he was term limited out, so he may still be on there. Bob also serves on the DEQ Drinking Water Advisory Committee and was the co-founder of the Backflow Association. He's currently on the Lake Ponderay Nearshore Committee, which is a citizens advisory committee that advises DEQ on what they would like to do concerning the Lake Ponderay shores. Bob's a busy man. He's a wealth of information when it comes to water. He could probably talk for 2 hours, I'm guessing, but he's going to talk for 5 minutes, maybe? 3, 5? Dan just gave up his time to you, so.
Now I'll try to keep it as short as possible. Many of you probably already know me. If you're not on the City of Sandpoint's water system, you're probably on one of the ones that
Hold the mic close.
one of the ones that we operate and supply water for. I think probably the biggest concern that I have that's arisen over the last 15 to 20 years in the water industry is the price that we're all paying for water. And I don't see what's happening right now driving those prices any place other than up. Everything we do, every new regulation we receive has some impact on the cost of water to each and every one of us. I don't care if you're a private homeowner with your own well or you're on some kind of a community system. It just goes with the territory. We have systems where we've seen people that were paying $6 a month for water 20 years ago are now paying $75 a month for water, and it's probably some of those going to go to $100 to $125 a month for water. And this isn't just due to water rights, it's due to lots of other regulatory agencies that become involved. I mean, we have the Department of Environmental Quality that's trying to enforce rules that the EPA has put out. We have the Department of Water Resources that we have to deal with our water rights. And it just seems to go on and on. So, like I say, my main concern is the price that we're all paying for water. Personally, we get involved, our business gets involved with processing water for people to consume. We process wastewater, have point discharges that go out into the bodies of water of the state. I'm proud to say that the point discharges that we operate are in full compliance with the EPA and DEQ, but it comes at a cost. Everything seems to come at a cost. There's a dollar sign in front of everything these days. So I don't know what the answer is. I think us coming together like this group that we're doing here today is a good start. And I would encourage everybody that if you're not already involved, to become as involved as you have time for, to try to curb some of the new rules and regulations that have been coming down the pike. They seem to be just overwhelming. We have other issues that are a part of what's going on here, things like the fluctuations in Lake Ponderay. I'm sure everybody's heard that the lake is being fluctuated up and down 5 feet several times during the winter, just for the sole purpose of generating power. I, like many of you, like to recreate on the lake. It's difficult to get a boat in or out of the water in the wintertime around here. I've kind of overcome that by keeping my boat in the water year-round, but it's an expense that we shouldn't have to incur just to be able to use our lake when we want to use it. So, guess you can talk forever. things that the big drivers behind some of the things that are going on, some of them will have some critical things that happen behind them. We have the Clean Water Act, which is the driving force behind a lot of what's going on here. The Clean Water Act, at the time it was enacted for probably some pretty good purposes. I remember when I was young, seeing the news where rivers were catching on fire back east where they were so polluted. And so, you know, I like to fish, and like I said, I like to spend time on the water, so I want the water to be clean, but it's gone so far beyond cleaning up rivers that are catching on fire to making water so pristine that you can almost drink out of it without having to treat it. And like I said, I just encourage everybody to get behind anything you can do, and like Heather had mentioned, getting together with groups to form coalitions to fight some of the overreaching regulations we have coming down is probably one of the best things that any of us could do. So thank you for your time. Sorry to take up so much of it.
No.
He brings up a great point. What I've noticed down in Boise in 3 years, what we are doing in my environment committee is we are inserting the EPA code by the volumes right into our state law. And they're doing this under the guise of, oh, we have primacy, we're in charge. So literally we'll pass a bill with just a little line in it, but it may be 4 volumes. It may be something that wide of regulations from the federal government, from the EPA, and that's being inserted right into our state law. And so our local guys are enforcing the EPA rules. And so you can talk to me about that later if you want. I could go on like you. So is Tom Puckett here? I think he had Tom. Tom's a Sandpoint realtor, and I do not have an intro for you. I'm so sorry. You're going to introduce yourself.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tom Puckett. I own Realm Partners in Sandpoint. I'm born and raised here. I have a lot of love for this lake, and I have a lot of love for the lake. I have a lot of love for the town, the community. Here is what we're after, is to join together so that we can fight what they're trying to do with our lake levels, our cleanliness of our lake. The cleanliness, I would say, I go out, I show waterfront a lot, and one of the things that I point out to people that are trying to come to this area, they can't believe that you can be in the boat and 60 feet down and see the bottom. That's unique to the outsiders. We take it for granted, or at least I do, because it's something that I've grown up with. What happens with fluctuation, and there's going to be people talking about this, but fluctuation causes hydraulic pressures. And ultimately, their fluctuating main purpose was for threatening floodwaters. But the reality is it's about money. And when they do drop the lake level, the hydraulic pressures cause sloughing, way more than any kind of boat wave action can do. Any surf wave, that's a big topic right now, surf wave boats. But if you look at time over time, way before surf boats, way before there was this much population, the sloughing of the lake happened due to fluctuations. Even though they do it in the winter, it still sloughs. So that's hopefully something that we can band together and try to control, because the last statement last year we had heard was that our lake was going to be at full pool June 15th. Then the smoking mirrors started. And the smoking mirrors started with, well, you know, the floodwaters. Well, we were past that point. And we started getting other stories about what was happening downstream. There was damage to the dam. They were trying to keep the water level down to make repairs. But they had the whole winter to perform these repairs. So I guess for me, I'm frustrated as a property owner, as a user of this lake, as a professional in the industry trying to sell waterfront, and you're telling people that the water is going to be at this lake level, and in reality it doesn't. And then they start making the threats of, you know, not until July 2nd, 3rd, but we're gonna have it up by July 4th. It's unexcusable. It's our lake. Everybody in here that pays taxes, everybody that uses our lake, the main purpose is for recreation. That is the absolute #1 main purpose of our lake. One of the things that happened to me this year was, and it's, in a way it's petty, but it's still an issue. The lake level starts rising, as it does every year. Grateful for that. Pull my boat into the lift, raise it out of the water. 2 days later, the lake goes down, I can't remember, 2 feet. The first time I've ever seen it, ever on a summer pool rise, that it drops that drastically. I wasn't the only one affected, obviously. A lot of my neighbors, same thing. Our boats are unusable. Can't get answers other than July sometime it's going to be at full pool with no explanation. And it's kind of tyrancy. It's you know, they do what they want, and I feel we need to do what we need to do, and that is to enforce and protect our lake. The other thing I want to touch really quickly on, I don't know, everybody's still, I feel like, a few years back about milfoil. Milfoil is way better than it used to be. I monitor a lot of the bays just personally, watching for where to stay out of with my boat so that I don't transport it to another bay or what have you. Flowering rush. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. It's, so, Perch Bay, Shaw Bay at Sunnyside, the first plant that I saw was about 3 years ago, and it was like a group of 10 maybe. This year, there's about probably close to 1,000. It is the fastest spreading noxious weed. Class A is how Washington classifies it, Class A noxious weed that they have going on. More than milfoil, more than anything, and it's choking out bays. It can grow into 9 feet of water, which is substantial. If you need verification of it, look at whitefish. There are property owners, lakefront owners, they cannot use their waterfront. It grows almost like grass. It's a reed, 7-foot long root base. They had been doing a bunch of testing on spraying for this. They found a solution that works. The Corps would not allow us to use it on the, and the treatment kills milfoil and it kills the flowering rush. And you have to have the lake level at its bottom and expose the ground. It's done in the winter time. And they did test sections where there is absolutely no milfoil. Still, after 4 years ago, it was sprayed. So that's something to keep in mind also during this. You know, we have quite a few things, it sounds like, to uphold and to band together about, but water rights, this all is in correlation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are all coming from different angles, and if we don't stand up for the people that are concerned about, maybe we're not concerned about weeds, but if we don't stand up with him on the weeds, he's not going to stand up on us for something else. So the other thing I wanted to just say briefly is we cannot exercise our rights unless we know our rights. And I was just going to read to you briefly the Idaho 1927 law, just a teeny bit of it. It's on Priest, Pend Oreille, and Coeur d'Alene lakes. It says the governor is hereby authorized and directed to appropriate in trust for the people of the state of Idaho all the unappropriated water in Priest, Pend Oreille, and Coeur d'Alene lakes. And I'm going to skip down one more sentence, and it says the preservation of the said in the lakes for scenic beauty, health, recreation, transportation, and commercial purpose necessary and desirable for all the inhabitants. And I think someone can find something in there for everyone. So, and I know the bass fishermen have a problem with the lake levels too, but they couldn't speak today. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Kevin Klunder. He's a 15-year resident of Sandpoint. He's an Idaho native, a CPA, and a certified financial planner. He's married. He has 2 kids, and his degree's from Eastern Washington University in accounting, marketing, and economics. And he's going to talk about small businesses and how the lake levels affect that in our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather. I first became involved with the Lake Pend Oreille Alliance back when I heard that the Army Corps of Engineers was considering drawing down our lake in the middle of August. And I thought about the economic impact of what that would be to Sandpoint, and it would just shut us down. We're a small community, and we often survive for our business owners on just a short summer season to make it throughout the entire year. A lot of us realize that Lake Pend Oreille is a big economic driver and brings a lot of people to our area and our community and causes many of us to live here near the lake. But I don't think we really know the numbers of what that means for our community. The Idaho State Parks and Recreation recently commissioned a study on the economic impact and importance of power boating in Idaho. And they broke it down by county, and Bonner County happens to be 3rd in the state for the importance of power boating. And it brings in about $40 million a year into our local economy. I was pretty stunned by that number, to say the least. And that's just the power boating. But in order for those people to come here, the lake has to be open for business. If it's not open until July 1st, we're missing out on a window of opportunity that occurs earlier on in the year. And if it closes, especially if it started to close in mid-August, we'd be missing out on a huge window for our businesses. When boaters come here in Bonner County, their spending is multiplied. And for every $1 million that they spend, the economic study that they did, or the state park, says that they're going to have a multiplier that's going to increase that $1 million of spending will be increased by about $680,000 of an additional multiplier effect, as that money that they've spent here in Bonner County would pass through to other hands. So it really has a huge impact on us all. And boaters, when they come here and they spend their money, they don't spend it just on boats. That's a big factor. They spend about $7 million a year on boats, $2.5 million for maintenance and repair, $1.5 million for storage on their boats, and then about $8.2 million for boat and vehicle fuel. But where the majority of our business owners are going to see they're having a bigger impact is when they have campsites and overnight lodging. They spend about $6 million a year on overnight lodging here in Bonner County. And then another $10 million in our restaurants, and an additional $5 million in incidental retail expenditures while they're here recreating. And that's just in our short window that we have during the year. When I worked with the Idaho Department of Commerce, they were able to get me motel lodging receipts. And we could see from what they had during the year, our hotels are full in July and August. And they're generating about $3 million of revenue a month for that period of time. The rest of the year, we have a lot of room to grow to get to that $3 million level. That would be very significant if we can convince the Army Corps of Engineers to fill our lake up in a more timely manner in the spring. This year we had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and I don't think many of us had our boats out on the water because the lake wasn't there.
Kevin. I've got we gotta move quickly because I just took a look at the time, so we're gonna kind of give you the 1 minute, maybe even when you first started. So our next speaker is going to be Mark Sauger. And Mark, he's a retired public servant. He's active in lake matters. He probably spends more time on the lake than anyone in here, about 150 days a year. He's a property owner. He's part of Lakes Commission, the Lake Pend Oreille Alliance, and I don't know what that says.
Oh, the Waterways Group for the county.
Oh, the Waterways Group. So thanks for speaking today.
Okay, I'll try to keep this very quick. Thanks everybody for being here. Water matters to all of us. I just wanted to say thanks to whoever wrote the program because I'm called a recreationalist. That's probably the nicest name I've ever been called. Let me wear my flip-flops today. Anyway, I'm a water skier. We ski from March or April until late October typically. Some years we get 170 days in. But more than anything, everybody has a right and the opportunity to get out on the water. The gentleman just before me mentioned that. Memorial Day, the water was low enough that a lot of people couldn't use their docks. So everyone has a right and opportunity to try and work on doing the pragmatic things. And my point is, there's a waterways meeting in the county. I think it's the second or third Thursday of each month. It's at the county building. It's run by our county commissioners, always there. In this case, our gentleman in the back. Thank you for being here and there always. And Mr. McDonald, and as well as many of our own colleagues and our friends. I encourage everybody, go to the meetings. There was talk of breaks and regulations on the river this year for no wake zones. Many of us banded together and said, why don't we work on the education part of it and get the word out that we're worried about the wakes and shoreline erosion. So I know we did that this year. Waterways is also working on a 3 to 5 year plan for improvements in our county. That's another thing that we can have an input on. So all my approaches are pragmatic. I want to be involved with the Alliance, and I am. There's also Lakes Commission that meets, I think it's quarterly. Molly's over here somewhere. They meet the 3rd Friday in August, or 4th Friday in August.
No, there's not a set date, but quarterly.
Okay, they meet quarterly. Regardless, you can go to these meetings. Sometimes they're in Priest River, sometimes they're here in this room. If you're involved, you'll also meet the people from EPA. You'll get email addresses for people that you can send messages to. We all think, is this really going to be effective? Somewhere I think Mrs. Suddick is here. And the Suddicks were instrumental in getting them to keep the water up in the lake a little longer. Now it's into September. So my encouragement is, we can think globally, and we should always act that way and be involved as a group, but also think locally and be pragmatic and think about all the little things, because you'd be surprised if you work local, you can get some success. My last thing is, the recreationalist goal would be we get year-round access locally in the Sandpoint area. That means we improve one of our local launch ramps so we can use it year-round. That helps emergency services as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Patricia Sudik, and she's going to get 1 minute. Patricia is a graduate of Washington State University of Pharmacy. She holds a master's in public health, University of Washington, and a master's of administrative pharmacy from the University of Minnesota. Patricia is a researcher in new drugs and clinical trials with the FDA, a retired consultant and pharmacist in long-term care. And you probably go, why is she speaking today? Most importantly, Patricia, and I don't see her, oh, there you are. Patricia is the founder of PORPA, which is the Pend Oreille Rowing and Paddling Association, and the founder and event chair of the Pend Oreille Regatta, and that kind of is out of the Priest River area. And come on up here and speak away.
Thanks for putting this on.
Yeah.
I got asked to speak because I think I have an unusual use for water up here. I moved here from Seattle, and I brought my biscottis, my yogurt, and my Cafe D'Arte coffee. But I could not bring rowing until 2011, when we started, the head of the Pond Oreille rowing regatta. For you, do you know what, when I talk about rowing? The stuff that you see, the boys in the boat. How many red boys in the boat? 2011 was our first regatta in Priest River. It's our 7th one this year, and it's the 30th of September. Now, it's the last weekend in September because the water starts to go down too soon for us to go later. We actually would like to do it later. 2014, we started the Pond Oreille Rowing and Paddling Association, and there's some information up here about that if you want to get involved. That is a group of people, this is the health aspect. We row on the Pond Oreille and the Priest Rivers. And that club now has 5 shells, a safety boat, and a trailer. So we are growing. We row, and we could row from mid-May or even mid-April till the middle of November. But we have to pull out of the water by the 15th of October usually. And so that's a unique use of the water here, but it's a very viable use for water here. And thank you for your time.
Weeds is a huge problem, and we probably could spend 2 hours just on weeds. And I just want to mention Dave Klutz is here. Dave, would you raise your hand? Dave works with private property owners with weeds, and his cards are on the front table. I just met him, so you may want to talk with him at some point. Our next speaker, Thomas Herron. Thomas, is a regional water quality manager for Idaho Department of Environmental Quality out of Coeur d'Alene. He's originally from Leslie, Michigan. He has a degree in fisheries and wildlife biology and management from Michigan State University. We might get a yell out of that one. Tom also served as a Marine and was a Navy hospital corpsman and an aeromedical evacuation technician from 76 to 82. Tom worked on a variety of aquatic issues all over Idaho with Idaho Fish and Game, Idaho DEQ, and is on his 29th year of working with the state of Idaho. Please welcome Tom.
Thank you, Heather. I can speed this up a little bit, I think. What I'll do to speed this up is not dwell too much on the water quality standards, which I think everybody can look up online and revel in their abandon with that. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to a group like this that truly cares about water quality, property rights, and the protection of Idaho's most valuable renewable resource. Water is the lifeblood of Idaho for recreation, wildlife, aesthetics, navigation, industry, commerce, agriculture, and municipal use for drinking water and industrial use. Water quality standards are the benchmark DEQ uses to know if it's adequately protecting Idaho's surface water. Streams, rivers, lakes, and reservoirs. Idaho adopts water quality standards to protect public health and welfare, enhance the quality of water, and meet the requirements of the Clean Water Act, which states that water quality standards should do the following: provide water quality for the protection and propagation of fish, shellfish, and wildlife, and recreation in and on the water, fishable, swimmable conditions, where attainable. Consider the use and value of state waters for public water supplies, propagation of fish and wildlife, recreation, agriculture, and industrial purposes, and navigation. The Idaho Water Quality Standards Program is a joint effort between DEQ and EPA. DEQ is responsible for adopting and enforcing water quality standards that protect beneficial uses. Water quality standards define the designated beneficial uses of a water segment and the quality of water. For example, necessary to support those uses. Water quality standards are important because they let us know whether or not we are sufficiently protecting the water quality of Idaho's surface waters and provide the goals when that quality must be restored. Criteria may be numeric or narrative. Narrative criteria are sometimes referred to as free-from criteria, as they often state that water body must be free from something. For example, free from nuisance aquatic plant growth. The water quality standards consist of three basic elements, the ABCs of water quality. Anti-degradation is a policy to maintain and protect existing uses in high-quality waters. Beneficial uses, uses of the water body, for example, recreation, water supply, aquatic life, and agriculture. Criteria, the level of water quality needed to protect beneficial uses, numeric concentrations, and narrative requirements. The state also has the prerogative to create general policies that address implementation issues, such as allowing variances in mixing zones, specifying unusual conditions, for example, during low flows, during which criteria are allowed to be exceeded. Our use of water quality standards and criteria to support beneficial uses is akin to our Bill of Rights to protect the rights of Idaho citizens to have clean and usable water. It could be considered a water right not entirely different than water rights to divert water and put it to work for agriculture, attainment of beneficial uses. There is a strong connection between water rights and water quality. We utilize watershed and basin advisory groups to advise us in the implementation of water quality improvement practices or best management practices to protect and restore water quality. Watershed advisory groups ensure that there's a balance struck between assuring water quality standards are met, but also that uses of water are protected for Idaho citizens. We work through voluntary and cooperative means with watershed advisory groups, WAGs, to assure property rights, water rights, and recreational rights are maintained for future Idahoans throughout the state. We also work with private hydroelectric developments such as Avista to provide efficient renewable energy while protecting water quality and fisheries. Private hydroelectric developments must operate under a federal energy regulatory license. Federal operations do not. The private regulatory license requires water quality certification and settlement agreements to assure water quality and fisheries needs are met, and to mitigate for losses to water quality and habitat from inundation of streams and rivers. Northern Idaho receives water from Montana and Canada and passes the water on to Washington, or we return it to Canada. Upstream states are required to meet the water quality standards of the downstream receiving states. We have a border nutrient management agreement with Montana to identify water quality targets for Lake Oreille to assure that our water quality is sustained at a level that assures our beneficial uses are fully supported. We also receive water from Montana and the Kootenai River after they receive the flow from Canada through Libby Dam before the flow returns then to Canada. Water passes on to Washington from the Oreille River and the Spokane River. An important feature of the water from these large rivers is that they are passed through lakes and discharged as the warmer upper waters of large lakes such as Lake Oreille, Priest Lake, and Lake Coeur d'Alene. Water quality is also supported by prescriptions to restore or improve water quality that isn't fully supporting beneficial uses called total maximum daily loads. TMDLs are allocations of pollutants that are managed through discharge permits that regulate discrete point sources through the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. These permits are currently written by EPA and include water quality certifications by the state of Idaho though Idaho is seeking primacy in developing permits that assure water quality beneficial uses are fully supported. We have a nearshore TMDL for Lake Oreille to limit nutrients from point sources and non-point sources that degrade water quality in more vulnerable shallow areas of the lakes. A type of pollutant that we also are seeing is in the form of invasive species. These are non-native aquatic plants and organisms that are voracious competitors against native plants. The invasive species that are spread throughout many of our waters include Eurasian water milfoil, curly-leaf pondweed, flowering rush, bulrush, and hybridized Eurasian water milfoil. Also a diatom called didymo that's prevalent in the Priest River. Invasive species are the single greatest threat that we have to our water quality as dense stands take root in sediments and displace native plants that provide fish habitat. The state of Idaho spends millions of dollars to prevent the spread of invasive species through boat and inspection stations, treatment of extensive invasive plants with herbicides that are governed under NPDES general permits to assure human health and safety to protect drinking water that is drawn from lakes and rivers. Invasive fish species that have entered our waters include walleye, northern pike, smallmouth and largemouth bass, and lake trout. These fish are voracious predators that consume established forage species and impact populations of native species. We have identified that water quality is a right of the citizens of Idaho, and water quality must be protected for downstream interests that receive water from Idaho. There are a number of challenges to this fundamental right of the people of Idaho. These challenges reside in what we refer to as the human dimension of resource management. This includes the local rules and ordinances of city and county government, as well as the perception and decision-making parameters of citizens and agencies. We've seen areas where the use of pesticides have been banned in the interest of protecting swimmers under the perception that pesticides are harmful. Even when properly administered through accepted application standards under NPDES general permits. The thought may be that hand removal is an effective tool, but we don't see that as an effective mechanism at this point. We also see that the use of Endangered Species Act to protect water discharged from Lake Pend Oreille and Pend Oreille River could cool downstream water to enhance bull trout habitat. And that's been developed, I think, in this meeting. So we have to consider what we're doing with water and where we're going with it, and we have to think about preserving water quality. And at that rate, I leave it to the citizens to identify what their priorities are and how we implement those. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question real quick. So can you give me a hypothetical quickly, talking about siphoning water? We talked a little bit, we had a conversation about siphoning water from Priest Lake that does have a water right to keep the lake at a certain amount. How could that hypothetically fit into water rights? Would you just, 1 minute?
Absolutely. The reality is, you know, we've seen the proposal of a deep water siphon to remove water from Priest Lake into the Priest River, with the caveat that the lake level would be maintained in Priest Lake. And we've heard today about the Klamath situation where federal courts have gotten involved and are closing reservoirs and mandating minimum flows. Well, just imagine, if you will, once a system like that is installed with somewhere around who knows how many millions of dollars, that a federal court would relinquish the propensity to allocate that they have to use Priest Lake water to cool not just Priest River, but much more of the Pend Oreille River system, which we saw the first effort out of the box to lower Lake Pend Oreille levels in the recreation system. So just consider that as a water right issue that involves water quality.
This guy is a wealth of information. Thank you. We just have a few more speakers. We are almost done. We're going to probably go just a few minutes over, but we'd like to have Jim Haynes next. Jim has a doctorate in chemical engineering with a specialty in modeling. Jim's going to talk a little bit about modeling. I'm going to give you 2 minutes.
I can do it in one.
Oh, love it. And explain how the levels do make a difference.
But if it's good, let it go longer.
Yeah, I've got a 15, 20-minute presentation, and I'm not going to go there. I do have a PhD in chemical engineering, and my emphasis was on simulation and modeling and applying that to solve large interrelated systems and how they run and how to optimize them. So what you have is a large interrelated system with, I was going to start with the Clark Fork River Basin, do the modeling of that for level predictions going downstream. when you look at what happened this summer, somebody at the Corps doesn't have that model. Or if they are, they're not paying attention to it. So either way, that was one thought. The other one is that we are the sole source aquifer that's under the Rathdrum, Spokane Valley and the Rathdrum Prairie, gets a large amount of its recharge from Lake Pend Oreille. If we kept our water higher, there would be higher hydraulic forces that would recharge not only the aquifer, but the flow in the Spokane River. So I think that there's, with some modeling, with some simulation work, you could quantify how much of that could happen, and I think it would be a driver for keeping our lake up at a higher level for a longer period of time. Thank
you. The science behind it is critical, and people like this who can actually articulate it. I heard he has quite the presentation to show all the modeling and the maps of it, and it's just great. Okay, we have one added speaker, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up into an action plan and some other stuff. So Ron Stocking, would you come up here real quick? Ron is a Selkirk fire chief, and he deals with the emergency operations and emergency access. And since he wasn't on the schedule, he only gets 1 minute.
I don't even need 1 minute. So the reason the lake levels need to be up is we can only access the lake 6 months out of the year. We know that transportation incidents, railway, highway, we have a major long bridge. If we were to have an accident and a spill, we need to have access to that lake to put booms out and to recover the the spilled stuff. So from a fire department standpoint and emergency system standpoint, we absolutely support keeping the lake levels higher so we can access that lake year round. That's all I gotta say. Thanks.
Thank you. Todd Sudik is our next speaker. Todd is a 36-year resident of Bonner County, living on the Pend Oreille River for that time. He attended Utah State University where he majored in aeronautics. Tom spent 22 years in the Marine Corps, active in reserve as a pilot, and retired as a lieutenant colonel. Todd was an airplane pilot for 30 years and retired in 2007. In all his free time, he's owned several small businesses, spent 14 years on the Bonner County Waterways Committee, and he also served as the Bonner County Commissioner from 2015 to 2017. This makes me never want to retire. One thing you might want to know about Todd is he is an active voter also. So Todd, you'd come talk about EISs and a little bit of involvement before our final speaker. You do great.
Actually, somehow EIS got thrown in there. By the way, thank you, Heather, and thanks to Ralph Slediger and the Pend Oreille Alliance for putting this on, and all of you for coming. And I guess the topic of my presentation really is it's all about power. And flood control and fish preservation factor in, but it's really all about power. And I'm going to make my case for that in 3 minutes, hopefully, maybe. What are the stresses on the generating capacity of 31 federal dams in the system? Well, we have the northwest power requirements, Idaho, Washington, Montana, and Oregon. Then we have 2 high voltage lines to Los Angeles. One is a DC line that goes to Sylmar, California, and one is an AC line. DC line is called Pass 65, has a capacity of 3,100 megawatts. There are many other paths going around the system. Pass 65, which comes from our system, supplies 48.7% of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power's peak capacity. Almost half. Anytime intertide demands lessen, the excess is distributed elsewhere on the western power grid. Everybody tends to think of this as a closed system. In fact, it spreads all over the West. And those states include Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico. AC converters down at Sylmar using light-triggered thyristors for any of you who are inclined in that direction, convert DC to AC. Los Angeles gets 40% of its electricity from coal-fired power plants outside the state. So in 2025, Los Angeles, California, as a matter of fact, is going to quit buying coal-fired electricity in 2025. Right now, it imports over 33% of its energy. That's 50% more than in 2001. California wants 1.5 million electric cars on the road by 2025. That's going to drive demand up hugely. The bottom line is that California needs large hydro, and we are it. The next stress that's coming up on the system in terms of capacity is the B2H, or Boardman to Hemingway line, from Boardman to Hemingway near Boise, with plans for it to go beyond. Now let's talk about the hierarchy in terms of who really controls things. At the top of the heap is an outfit called FERC, which somebody mentioned earlier, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. FERC is, one of its mandates is to regulate the transmission and wholesale sales of electricity in interstate commerce. And there are two parts to this mandate. One is to ensure distribution, and the other is to ensure pricing. Now let me show you how this works. In 1996 and again in 2000, California ran out of power. So what they do, they went to the President and Congress and they said, geez, we need power. So the President and Congress got involved, they went to BPA and they said, power to California. So BPA says, okay. So they send power to California, taxing the system so highly that Avista was, and other agencies were forced to buy power from Canada, which was at a higher cost. On top of that, Enron, everybody remembers Enron, was diverting 1/3 of that power mandated by Congress to LA by FERC in August of 2000 to Arizona and New Mexico, where prices were unregulated, so they made a lot of money off the deal. There's another agency called the Western Electric Coordinating Council that's kind of the western third of the United States that is supposed to monitor and comply and enforcement in terms of power usage. There's another agency called NERC, North American Electric Reliability Corporation. They're involved. So why am I telling you this? Well, the reality of the situation is there's a finite resource in the nameplate capacity of the 31 dams, finite. In other words, it can't produce any more power. So if the balloon goes up and California goes crying to Washington and says we need more power, and the President or Congress says, okay, you got it, what's it going to do to the Pacific Northwest? They're going to start opening up and letting the water flow to generate electricity. Now, I'm going to throw one more thing out and I'm going to end, and that's on water adjudication and the tribes. I don't know how many of you know, but BPA has given a tribe, a small tribe, 400 tribal members on 420 acres just over the border into Washington, money to buy land as replacement for water claimed land when they built the dam. Well, where did they buy that land? In northern Idaho, up by just west of Priest Lake, on a river, on a small stream, I should say. So when you get into tribes claiming Aboriginal rights, and you think this wasn't done by design, and I'm usually not a conspirator theorist, but I am in this case. I see the tribes coming in and saying, well, wait a minute, the water flows by us and it flows down to Priest River, and Priest River flows into the Oreille River, and this is our Aboriginal roaming. By the way, it's all ours, over the fact that they just bought this property, paid for by the taxpayers. So anyway, bottom line, and I'll wrap up here, is that everyone wants our power, and everybody wants our water to generate that power. So I'm throwing those facts out because the reality of the situation is the pressure to release water to generate power is only going to increase. And I want to thank you.
We have one more speaker. I'm going to mention 2 items before we get to that. Dock permits, being as that was on the agenda, all I'm going to say is you have to get a dock permit and a dock number before you put in a dock or a buoy, and you do that through the Idaho Department of Lands. So that's all I'm going to say on that. We're obviously not going to have time for Q&A. There's little index cards up here on the front table, and if you want to write questions on that, everyone's going to kind of hang around afterwards, but if you want to write questions, if you have a question, I'm sure somebody else has it, The Pond Oreille Alliance is going to put those on their website, questions and answers. So you'll get them answered one way or another. And our last speaker is going to be Norm to sum things up for us. Mr. Semenko.
Thanks, Heather. All right, so first of all, a little housekeeping. There was reference about being an attorney. I do work for the Lake Pond Oreille Alliance, just in full disclosure, and I am helping on some of these issues. I'm from North Idaho. I have a Boise office, and as of August 1st, I will have a Washington, D.C. office as well. So, like I said, it is on. We'll be working on these issues. So what do we hear today? There are a lot of threats to the water resources in this basin. Downstream interests, we just heard, again, underscored. The focus on power generation downstream, but also flood control needs, ecosystem function, whatever that is. Those demands are going to be there. There are folks downstream. There's an old saying in water rights adjudications between states, if you're the upstream state in an upstream-downstream thing, generally the upstream state gets, you can insert your description there. It doesn't usually come out well for the upstream state. There's a lot to protect there. Apathy and lack of involvement, I don't think we have this in this community. I think we've got great involvement. Things like the Columbia River Treaty, the review of the system under the EIS that's going to be going on, all those things are huge potential threats. The opportunity that you have is that you have this cornerstone water right that's held by the governor of the state of Idaho in trust for all the people of the state of Idaho for all of those purposes of scenic beauty and health and recreation, transportation, commercial uses, recognizing private property rights, public rights, and all the commercial uses. The vision that the leaders in the state working with your predecessors in this area had, that is a protectable private property right recognized under the U.S. and Idaho Constitution, private property that's protectable as a water right. So that's your huge opportunity to protect that. And the last thing I would say, in summing it up, is the place to go is to the website that's at the very bottom of your agenda here, the Lake Pond Oreille Alliance. Get engaged if you're not already involved. There are ways to get involved, obviously through your contributions to that nonprofit, but also through the various subcommittees that are formed and that are forming around the recreational issues and the commercial issues and everything else that you heard today. So it's been my pleasure to be here with you today, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dennis. Thanks.
I appreciate everybody sitting in here. It's a little warm. And, you know, Lake Pond Oreille Alliance, we do need your help. We do need involvement. We're fighting for certain things for all of us. We're not in it for money, although we are asking for $100 million. But that money is going to be used to bolster our rights and to keep lake access where it should be. We want the lake at full pool for 6 months out of the year. Senate document number 9 didn't say that's optional. That's a law. The 1927 Idaho state law gives us the control of the dam and outlines all of our rights. We also want a seat at the table. We want input into how the dam is operated. We're going to fight like heck to prevent our water from being diverted to any other states for any economic purpose or agricultural purpose. It's kind of interesting. We did find out that one of the federal agencies is reinterpreting some of the agreements that they had with the railroad back in the 1800s because they want to be able to lay in along where the railroad tracks are fiber optic cable or large diameter water pipe. We know what that's for, moving water. So with your help, the other thing that we're going to accomplish here pretty soon with the help of Norm, we are going to ask that the dam be formally turned over to the state of Idaho. Yeah, we got to go to Congress. It's our dam. The law says so. It's not optional. And when I say this, I mean it in a very nice way. Thanks for coming. Go jump in the lake.
I just want to take a moment to let you know that I've worked with state and federal elected officials across the country for many years. And this week, to put in such a labor of love, to bring such a quantity of knowledge in one afternoon, Heather Scott, I think it's remarkable, and we need to give her a great big hand. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Yeah.